All right, welcome everyone. Please be seated. It's very good to see so many of you here. This looks very promising. So this is the new innovations in freshwater aquaculture event, which is organized by LUKE, which is the Natural Resources Institute Finland, and also organized by the Finnish presidency of the Council of the European Union. So Finland is now having the presidency time, and it's co-hosted by the European Committee of the Regions. And we thank especially the organizers for allowing to have this event here. This event is also streamed live through YouTube, so we have public through the internet also. We welcome you also. This topic is important for Europe, for our food security, and also for the environmental sustainability. Aquaculture has big potential, and perhaps not all the potential is realized yet. And of course, the idea now today is to discuss about the innovations and the potential pathways, how to go forward. This is a continue of the previous similar event when it was organized by Romania when they had the presidency. So this is a topic which maintains to be in the focus. My name is Antti Kause, I'm the moderator, I come from Finland, LUKE. And the next speaker here is Ossi Martikainen, and I kindly ask that each person who presents and then please tell your background a little bit, your expertise, your name. It's also when you comment, then please introduce yourself. And when you have comments, there's a red button on the desk to press so that your microphone is activated. And let's make this a good event. You can all contribute, so welcome Ossi.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Antti, our moderator, to open this conference, and thank you for the co-organizers, LUKE and Finnish presidency from Finland. It is very important to have you here, and as I'm here in the Committee of the Regions, the President of NAT Commission, we have two events at the same time. I just 20 minutes ago opened the other one, which is concentrated on forest sector and regional innovations on forest sector. So I think I go back there and come back here a bit later, but thank you that you are here in the European Committee of the Regions. Well, you asked everyone to tell something about his background. My background is that I have been active in European policies for 23 years, working with MEPs, with ministers, and now for 20 years as a member in the Committee of the Regions. And for this last half of the 5 years mandate, I've been the President of Commission for Natural Resources. It means agriculture, fisheries, rural development, forest, and so on, even tourism and health and so on. But now we are here to concentrate for sustainable development in freshwater aquaculture and fishing and so on. So I say some ideas on that from our point of view. So everyone, thank you for being here today, and for the Committee of the Regions, and for me personally, it's an honor to host this event here in the Committee of the Regions. As it is becoming increasingly clear that climate change action must be taken now, and climate emergency is indeed happening, it is very important to reflect on how we produce our food in a sustainable and climate neutral way. Freshwater fishing and aquaculture is one of the oldest known ways to do that, as our ancestors have been doing that from ancient times. Probably there is no better way to start a revival of this old tradition as under the patronage of Finland the land of thousands lakes. Here at the Committee of the Regions, we are currently working on our proposals to the European Commission in the framework of New Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, and we are looking into topics that are closely related to the topic of this event. What is the future of food? How to be innovative, how to create more sustainable and green food production chains, and most importantly, what are the right regulatory conditions that we need to create in order to make this happen? There are no simple answers to these questions, especially as you take into account the interdisciplinary character of food policy and all regulations related to it. In order to give answers to the questions on the future of sustainable food, we must look into food and consumer safety, environmental and sanitary rules, agriculture, fishing and aquaculture, distribution and value chains, food security, just named to only few. Then, as representatives of local and regional authorities, we have to make sure that all these rules are implemented at the level of our citizens and that the people are happy with them. Let me come back to my reference to freshwater fishing and aquaculture as a very old traditions. In fact, for thousands of years, that was the main source of fish for the vast majority of the population of the earth. Industrialization and pollution almost put an end to this tradition, and the seemingly never-ending supply of sea fish greatly diminished the importance of freshwater fish in the last century. Inevitably, we find ourselves in a situation where our seas and oceans have more plastic than fish, suffer under pollution and are on the verge of an environmental collapse. At least in Europe, strict regulations on freshwater polluters and biodiversity have led to the revival of the habitats in our rivers and lakes, maybe offering some hope in our quest for sustainable fisheries. I firmly believe that freshwater fishing and aquaculture can offer good answers to some of the problems of sustainable food production. I hope we will be able to give answers to some of these questions today, and I hope that you will enjoy your time here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ossi, for the wise words. We move directly to the next one, which is Riitta Rahkonen, who is the counselor in the Fisheries game section. You can please introduce.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. My name is Riitta Rahkonen, and I work in the permanent representation of Finland to the EU this year during Finnish presidency, and I work in fisheries and also wildlife. My background dates back to 1981 in Finnish Game and Fisheries Research Institute. I spent there for 20 years, and I did my PhD on fish parasites. That's sort of my expertise for a very, very long time ago. And then I spent 10 years in the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, drafting fish diseases and also wildlife diseases legislation. And after that, here and there, and now here. Concerning the Finnish presidency, we have still 1.5 very intensive, hectic months to go and proceed with the files, and then Croatians take over. And in my opening remarks, I will approach this, actually, yeah. I will approach this scene topic from the Finnish presidency point of view. Firstly, I will give you some ideas from the high-level general priorities and agenda of our presidency, and then closer to fisheries, and then briefly aquaculture in Finland and the EU, and also aquaculture in the framework of bioeconomy, and then conclusions. So, the high-level priorities. In our view, sustainability should be sort of common denominator of all EU actions. And so our priorities are here, listed here: strengthen common values and the rule of law, make the EU more competitive and socially inclusive, and then strengthen the EU's position as a global leader in climate action. And here, of course, there's a very strong link to the Green Deal as well. And also protect the security of citizens comprehensively. And about the agendas, actually, Finland is the first presidency to integrate the EU new, what is it called, strategic agenda to the Council's work. And so in the agenda, it focuses on 4 priorities, and you can see them here. And at least I think that this third one, so building a climate-neutral, green, fair and social Europe, so aquaculture could be part of the solutions. And so it's actually up to us and to do so, to integrate aquaculture to this priority. And as for the inherited agenda, so we are working with the very sort of complex horizontal issues as well, like multi-annual financial framework and rule of law and EU common values, and also Brexit. And concerning this MFF, so it's very important for the fisheries and aquaculture sector as well, since it will define the total budget of, for example, the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, which is very important for the whole sector, this fund. And Brexit, no one knows what happens, but anyway, if it takes place and UK leave, it surely will have impact on fisheries and also seafood markets. But let's see what happens. Then closer to fisheries. So Council Working Party on internal and external fisheries policy actually meets every week, and the presidency is chairing the meeting. And every autumn we need to set up the fishing opportunities for all EU sea areas or sea basins. And so we have finalized already Baltic Sea region, or Baltic Sea, and now on the table there are Black Sea, Mediterranean, and all other sort of Atlantic coast and sea area. And this year is challenging because it's the last year to reach the sort of so-called MSY maximum sustainable yield level for the most important commercial stocks. But EMF, so this European Maritime and Fisheries Fund regulation is really priority for us. And it is a very important funding tool for the whole sector. And for example, in Finland, we are funding aquaculture innovation program from the present EMF program, and I hope that we can hear some examples of that. And So at the moment, both European Parliament and the Council, they have now their own positions concerning this Council proposal on next EMFF, and the importance of aquaculture has been highlighted in both positions, even in the name. So perhaps the next program period will read European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. And negotiations, so-called trialogues, will start already next week with the Parliament, Commission and Council. But it's for sure that Croatia will continue the process, but the sort of objective for all parties is that this will be finalized soon. And of course we need to wait for the the MFF, the budget frame, but anyway, so that there will be no delays for member states to build up their own programs. And then we actually have finalized the first round of discussion on the council level on fisheries control regulations, and then we have been preparing very many negotiations with several regional fisheries management organizations and also third countries. But some words about aquaculture. So this graph shows the development of food fish production and its value in Finland from 1980. And as you can see, the development has not been very positive. And in spite that there has been made sort of serious efforts for both in the ministry and government level, and also on the aquaculture sector to remove the obstacles and unlock the potential. But however, now it seems that there is some, let's say, light foreseen, and I hope that we can hear something about that. So the red line there, or orange, it's inland production, and the blue one is sea, and the green dotted line is the value. So in the EU, the situation is not better. So in the blue bioeconomy report from this year, aquaculture is identified as a sector with high potential for sustainable jobs and growth. However, production has been stagnated in the EU for decades. And that means that the EU is the largest importer of seafood in the world. And the most important barriers identified are limited access to space and also difficulties in getting production licenses. I think this applies to almost all member states. And this is a picture from FAO, World Capture Fisheries and Aquaculture Production. And you can see the dark blue area there. It's so fish catches cannot practically increase anymore, but the aquaculture production worldwide is increasing very rapidly, but not in the EU. Although also in the EU the consumption of seafood and fish, it increases, and that means that we have to import a lot. So actually the self-sufficiency in the EU, it's like 45% only. So what we think is that it is very important that we integrate and bring aquaculture to sort of broader umbrella or framework of bioeconomy, because alone aquaculture is too weak, and especially like freshwater aquaculture, which is very, let's say, small sector. And we have done. So Finnish government made a request to the European Economic and Social Committee in April 19, and the question posed was that how can the EU boost the development of blue bioeconomy, and what will be the necessary prioritized actions. And actually the exploratory opinion was published very recently, and you can find the link here. I have no time to go in detail in that. And the aim is also to adopt Council conclusions on the update of the EU bioeconomy strategy during the Finnish presidency, and actually it might be incorporated this week. So both, I think, they have a very clear link to the European Green Deal, and it's important that aquaculture is integrated in these strategies. I think that's the only way to go forward. To conclude, so growth of aquaculture production cannot be obtained with sort of business as usual. I think we have enough not so good experience of that. So we need new mindset, new actions, innovations, and also public-private partnerships, both in inland and coastal areas. And I think that this private money, it's very important because public funding is decreasing, I think, in all member states. So we need to find good cooperation with the private sector and also investors. So thank you for all organizers, and thank you for your time. And
thank you, Rita. Time for comments, please. Please reflect. Is there somebody from Germany, for example, who want to reflect on this one?
of course, you don't have to.
Okay, the next speaker is Lorella de la Cruz Iglesias from DJ Ma. Please welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks first of all to the organizers, to the Finnish presidency and the Luke Institute, and to the Committee of Regions for hosting this event. In terms of my background, I have been working in the European Commission for already 18 years, most of my career in international trade, in DG Trade, and most recently in DG Mare. And I'm in the unit that deals with blue economy sectors, aquaculture, maritime special planning, and in particularly coordinator for the aquaculture team. We are a team of 5 people working on different aspects of aquaculture in the EU. So I would like to welcome the organization of this workshop because I think it's very timely. As many of you know, many of you I recognize here, we are, as Commission, launching a review of the strategic guidelines on the sustainable development of EU aquaculture. And we already had occasion to discuss what it means, this review for freshwater aquaculture recently in Helsinki with some member states that are most particularly interested in inland aquaculture. And this is for me, for the Commission, an opportunity to engage with the regions because we think the regions are key actors in the development and the implementation of a strategy that will bring more competitiveness and sustainability to the EU aquaculture sector. As you know, regions are most often the ones responsible for giving licenses for new farms and engaging in the necessary consultations with stakeholders. So we count, in fact, on the members of this committee, and we will discuss with the process on how to engage this committee in the development of the new guidelines. But we count on the members of the committee to make sure that the regions and the authorities in the regional level dealing with aquaculture will be part of the process. So I think the slide is already here. Sorry, the slides are already here. So I would like to start giving a kind of overview of where is EU aquaculture production and seafood production more generally now. This first slide is intended to show the potential, the potential is still out there for EU aquaculture development. Aquaculture, as you know, is the fastest fastest growing sector in food terms in the world, and the global aquaculture is set to grow even further. So as you see in this graph, global aquaculture is kind of surpassing already wild capture, and the potential is to increase still at global level, and the demand for aquaculture products will increase. If we look at the most recent data for EU production, the trend is an upward trend. We are increasing profitability and production. The latest data are from 2017, and according to this data, aquaculture production in the EU reached 1.4 million tons, with a value of 5 billion euros. And in the period from 2008 to 2011, aquaculture production in the EU has increased by 11%. However, this is not an homogeneous trend across the species or across member states. For example, if we take trout production, taking a freshwater species, this has decreased, in fact, over this period by 7%. Wild carp has increased by 6%. So despite this overall positive trend of EU production, the EU production still represents only 1.2% of world production and 2% of global value. In addition, the EU market only, in fact, the consumption in the EU market is only 10% of EU production. So 10%, no, sorry, the consumption, 10% of EU consumption is EU aquaculture production, only 10%. And also in terms of seafood consumption, 70% of our consumption is coming from third countries, not from EU production. So as you see, there's a lot of potential. We have improved, but still a lot of work to be done. And this is exactly why we are now engaging in a review of the strategic guidelines and the EU strategy on aquaculture. We have, in fact, had an external study evaluation, what we call a midterm evaluation of the method we're using for developing the EU strategy on aquaculture, that is the open method of coordination that you might all be familiar with. And we also have been looking at the economic data, and things have been increasing, things have been improving, but there's still slow growth and untapped potential. And we need also to bring, as it was mentioned at the beginning by other speakers, we also need to bring aquaculture more prominently in the broader policy agenda, including the Green Deal and the so-called farm to fork strategy. In terms of concentration of the sector, of the production is quite high in the EU. So you can see here, in terms of species, 9 species account for almost 90% of aquaculture production in the EU. So the potential of diversification is very, very high. and also the potential for using new methods of production, those that are emerging, like recirculating aquaculture systems, aquaponics, etc. This slide shows what we are currently using as a method for developing the EU strategy in aquaculture. Probably most of you are aware of it. As you know, the CFP regulation that was adopted in 2013 allowed us to develop this common strategy in the EU through a non-binding voluntary cooperation among member states facilitated by the Commission. And the main tools are portrayed here. The first tool was the adoption by the Commission of the strategic guidelines for the sustainable development of EU aquaculture in 2013. On the basis of that, those strategic guidelines, there were national strategic plans adopted by member states. All member states except Luxembourg adopted a national strategic plan. And there was an average target for growth of 25% in these plans for the sector. There's also been changes of best practices in implementing these plans facilitated by the Commission in the context of twice yearly technical seminars on aquaculture with member states, and also guidance documents that have been adopted by the Commission on how to apply EU legislation, notably environmental legislation, to the sector. And obviously, one important tool was also funding. So the EMFF fund that will finish next year has provided member states with 1.2 billion euros for the sector. In this slide, you will see part of the mission letter to our commissioner designate, Virginijus Sinkevicius. And this is particularly the part that is most relevant for aquaculture, in my view. As it was mentioned, the new the new political priorities now are focusing on, for example, the European Green Deal, decarbonization, being leaders in a green economy and a carbon-neutral continent. And as part of this Green Deal, we have this farm-to-fork strategy that aims at sustainable food systems across the value chain. And this is where aquaculture can play a really major role. And we are working inside the Commission to make sure that this is going to be the case. We also, in the new guidelines, we also intend to take lessons learned from the changes we have been having with member states and with industry on what has worked and what hasn't worked. And in terms of making our industry more competitive and sustainable. And we also take into account other developments, emerging issues like climate change that we have to address as quickly as possible for the sector to be sustainable. And obviously, we will also look at innovation and research. What have we achieved so far in terms of, new knowledge, new methods, new technologies for the sector? Finally, this review will help us also to guide better the expenditure under the new EMFF, or MFAF, as we call it also very often, program. And guiding this expenditure towards what is more important for the sector to develop in the different member states. The Commission has already started identifying areas that we think should be addressed in these new strategic guidelines. And this is an overview of these areas. One important element, obviously, will be environmental performance. We talk about the role of aquaculture in the Green Deal and in the farm-to-fork strategy. So environmental performance will be a key element. But we also have to deal with issues that are still not completely addressed. Like, for example, the still high level of administrative burden for developing new farms, the access to space and water. We have also, as I mentioned, climate change, an emerging issue that is quite urgent to address. We have also the question of consumer information, how we make sure that our consumer is aware of the high level of sustainability and quality of EU production, the type of regulations that producers are subject to in order to choose European production when they go to the market. And then we have still challenges in terms of health, animal health and welfare, access to medicines and veterinary medicines and vaccines, not compliance with standards in terms of animal welfare. We also think there's a potential also to work better in terms of establishing producer organizations, organizing the sector, and not only the sector itself, but also inter-branch organizations that link producers with processors and retailers. Obviously, the role of innovation will be key in all this. We would like to set clear priorities on innovation, the use of future funds for supporting innovation in the sector. Control has also been identified as a key issue to deal with. Traceability of products, not only EU products, but also third country products, and control of fraud, fight against fraud. And then finally, integration of the activity in the local economy. We think this is also key for acceptability of the growth of the sector. We need to have a better integration of aquaculture in the local economy and with other competing sectors in a way for space and access to water. So obviously most of these issues are relevant also for freshwater aquaculture. And in this last slide, I have tried to reflect some of the discussions we have been having with stakeholders in the freshwater aquaculture sector, member states, but also industry, and more recently in Helsinki. And I think we can identify a few issues that have to be addressed, like diversification and adding value to the production. That's certainly one issue. We need new products in terms of processed products that are more attractive to the consumers. We need to deal with new species and also new production methods like polyculture. Polyculture is possible, and even for example for ponds, carp farming, we can explore polyculture. Commercialization is important. Now, basically, especially for carp, the commercialization is made directly to the consumer. So from the farm to the consumer, there's no retailers that are commercializing at the higher scale some of these products that are traditional products. So I think the link to retailers and also the producer organizations is something that could be improved. The valorization of environmental services. We know that pond aquaculture, among others, has a value, benefits for the environment, so we have to find a way to give value to this. I mentioned already environmental performance, increasing the environmental performance and dealing with issues like mitigation of nutrients emissions. And finally, still, we have to deal with the issue of space and access to water. So these are a few issues we have identified, but of course, we are still working in the development of the new guidelines, and we are very happy. We'll be very happy to have your input as well on what is most important for freshwater aquaculture in this new strategy. So thank you very much. Again, encouraging everybody to provide input and engage the regions on this process. Thank you.
If you can leave this slide on. Okay. Thank you very much, Lorella. Very concrete issues there. What is now important is that now it's a very good time to suggest things which European Union should put forward. So there's a very good moment now to provide input. And for example, now on this one, there's a list of things which are currently kind of popping up. So please be active on reflecting again.
Jouni Vilma from Luke, Anti's colleague. I have a talk later today. Can you give an example of this valorization of environmental services, especially in pond aquaculture? But what kind of activities those could include?
Well, for example, there are probably people from Hungary and Czech Republic. For example, for the carp farms, there are huge ponds which are also you know better.
Hello, my name is Věra Koutka from the Czech Republic, and we know very well what are the environmental services provided by ponds. It's, for example, the role of retention of water in the landscape, accumulation, which helps within the climate change. Also, there is an important role for social economy, because ponds ensure a space for tourism also, even for swimming. There are ponds that are not that intensive, so they can be used for swimming, for recreation, and also it's an important thing for, or shape for landscape, or tool for landscape. For the time being, I don't think it's all, but these ones are that I'm now able to remember. So I think it's all.
And the way I have understood is that, I mean, these ponds are huge. They can be 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. And there's no necessary contrast between aquaculture and the environmental services. They help each other.
Yes, they can help each other, but
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Béla Halaskóvás from Hungary. In my presentation, I will tell some words about pond aquaculture also. About the ecosystem or environmental services of the pond aquaculture, you have to know that these fish ponds are an artificial origin. So more or less, these are not natural ponds. It was made especially for fish farming. These ponds has a very unique so-called fish pond ecosystem, what is based on that kind of technology, what is going on that ponds, and for this reason, the fish ponds have a very complex environmental services. The first, as the woman from Czech Republic told, the water retained, or the other very important part of this complex values are the natural values, mainly the bird species what are connected to these artificial wetland habitats. But there are some other environmental issues, for example, retain of nutrients. So for this reason, the fish ponds have a different type of environmental service. The first is natural maintenance of natural values. There are some kind of water management issues also, and some social importance, for example, tourism, recreation, and so on. Thank you.
Okay, one issue I want to raise is the topic what you mentioned. It's that linking the producers, processors, and new products consumers. And this is a trend which is occurring, for example, in Finland very strongly. So that the amount of whole fish in the shops has decreased dramatically within the last 10 years. And for some species, let's say from fisheries, which are typically underutilized, then nowadays there are nice products out of those fish species, like fish fingers. And this is food which is served in schools, let's say, so that the demand of the fish is increasing through these new products, which use the domestic fish volumes. Do you want to, Mari, comment on this one?
Well, I will probably talk more
Okay.
during my presentation, but to use those not so well used fish products.
Okay. So Mari represents the industry from Finland, and the industry is working on this sort of issues. More comments, please. Okay, thank you, Lorella.
Thank you.
We move forward, and next we have Marta Iglesias from the DG RTD. Welcome.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank you for the organizers, the Committee of the Regions, Luke, who has come to visit us to DG Research and Innovation, proposing their views on research and innovation for unlock the freshwater aquaculture, which is very good, very much appreciated to know that you are there, that you are working in the same lines as we are doing. So thank you for this. My background, I've been working in research and innovation for the last 16 years. Specifically on aquaculture research and innovation for the last 6 years, but also in the past I worked with small and medium enterprises, which were also in the blue growth sector, let's say aquaculture, fisheries, biotechnologies, marine biotechnologies. Today I would like to say that European aquaculture is facing a great momentum. We have the new elected commissioner, president for the commission, who is going to put forward this strategy from farm to fork. As you were saying, it's a holistic approach to the food production system. We will be challenged to connect production with transformation, logistics, consumers, implementing the digital technologies. We have to make use of what the technologies are offering to make this industry much more technological developed and attractive for investments. So from the research side, we are looking into unlock this potential. We want to de-risk investment and to bring this profession, this aquaculture industry forward, no? Because in the European Union so far accounts for 1/3 of the production. I think the potential is high, especially because it's a climate neutral industry. It can be perfectly adapted to the climate challenges. I will show you some research ongoing on this. And I think it has a lot to say in the ensuring food and nutrition security and the production of biomass. So if I could have my presentation. Okay. So first of all, I would like to present today what we have heard about the research and innovation priorities for the freshwater aquaculture. What these priorities come from? It comes from our SCARFISH group, which is the Standing Committee for Agricultural Research. It has a subgroup on fisheries and aquaculture. And together with the European Aquaculture and Technology and Innovation Platform, who is linking the producers to the research part. Let's say they are bringing two ways, the knowledge to those who are going to use it and the user needs for more knowledge. So just to say some of them, new aquaculture species and rearing technologies in ponds and RAS. It has been also highlighted by Lorella. Of course, we have to fight fish diseases in order to ensure a production, but in the same time, it has to be done in a sustainable way, reducing this veterinary medicine, stimulants. For that, we are promoting breeding programs for animal welfare and disease resistance. New feeding so far it is a replacement of fish oil and fish meal in the feeding of the fish. This is a challenge that we are working on. I will also show you some project that has already delivered a completely vegetarian feed for some species of freshwater aquaculture. New technologies, new way of sustainable intensification of the process. We want to ensure that we implement the circularity of the systems and the sustainability through this RAS, integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, this system which is combining intensive and extensive production systems and aquaponics. These are the ones that I have in my mind right now, but probably we can even innovate in more. As is said, the valorization of the ecosystem services provided by the pond aquaculture, development of tools to assess the producer on how to better and make it more efficient, the production in terms of economy, but also taking into consideration the social aspects, because we want that the production is in the market is socially acceptable. It's very important for the European aquaculture to work on this. As I said, I also include in the fish processing, the industries that can offer a final product with high added value that can compete in the external market. The EU food production industry is very strong outside Europe, so we should be part of this. And finally, this improve of nutrition on human diet by increasing that part of fish and seafood in the diet. So I'm going to bring first some Horizon 2020 projects. You know, we are at the end of the Horizon 2020 program, and there's some projects. In the call for proposals, I always had asked for freshwater aquaculture consideration. So most of the projects, among all the species, are considering some very commercial species for freshwater, like the common carp. So this one may be of your interest because it's really looking at the parasite for the finfish. They are developing new knowledge, how the transfer between farm and wild animals is happening in terms of the parasite. They are developing new prophylactic measures, including vaccines and feeding treatments. They developing diagnostic tools because prevention is key. If we can prevent and also delimited the outbreak of any diseases, we can ensure that it will not affect others, and it could take the necessary actions well in advance. Therefore, they are also considering these factors for transmission and pathogenesis of the parasites. They are drawing a zoonotic map with risk due to the parasites and how they are, let's say, moving from one side to another. And they provide good practices for husbandry. So this is a parafish control. It will be ending in March this year. So I invite you to attend to the final result projects, because there you can interact with those who has worked on it, and they can give you really feedback on the state of the art and how to move this forward. In particular, these are the parasites they are considering, and you can see there for the common carp, you have these parasites. Another thing that it was said, it was making a space for the aquaculture. We have this project, which is finished very recently, last February, which is making a space for, they are providing tools for renting licenses for aquaculture. In particular, they are considering also freshwater environments. So this toolbox is open access. It may be used for national authorities to speed the process of granting licenses. So I invite you to see it. This project TAPAS is for assessment of the sustainability in terms of ecosystem impacts. They are taking into consideration what is the regulation asking for environmental impact, but also is revising the carrying capacity. They are providing also tools for assessing where to put the exploitations for the new farms in certain areas, take it in consideration, not only the regulation, but also all the possible uses of the environment. So at the end, it's also developing a toolbox to help to speed this process. So in particular, what is delivered in this project? They are having case studies through whole Europe, but I bring to your attention the ones on freshwater cages and freshwater ponds. This is using all the technologies available from the Earth observation data, which is the Sentinel-2 is already providing in situ data very much accurate, so it's free for use. So we are asking companies or entrepreneurs to use this to digest that information and provide support for the aquaculture producers. It is contrasted with in situ real-time monitoring systems, and is providing, as I said, this risk assessment about not only diseases, but also toxic substances, maybe harmful algae blooms, anything that can impact the production. Climate change. We, Horizon 2020, look for not only the threats but also opportunities with this climate change. So again, this project, Climefish, has built case studies, and one of the case study is also for freshwater aquaculture. Here is I'm sorry because this slide is blurred, but it gives you the idea where this case study for freshwater aquaculture is taking place. And now I come to the part of innovative. This is FP7, which is the previous framework program for research and innovation. This project finished long ago, but it gives an idea what the innovative could be from freshwater aquaculture. This aquaponics, which is combining the production of freshwater fish with the horticulture production. This project was a demonstration project in Germany, and they have assessed the sustainability and the marketability of the both productions. So some of the conclusions were that they produce locally in a semi-circular way because the fish still need to be fed externally. So this is something that still needs to be targeted. It's also considered organic because the production is close. So there's no antibiotic use, not for the fish, and no pesticides for the plants. So we can label it as organic. The aquaponics installation may have an impact in the properties in the area because if the demand is high, it may increase the price. So somehow it will bring economic benefits for the area. At the moment, the fish species they are considering for aquaponics is tilapia, catfish, and trout. But there are could be other productions, for example, frogs and sturgeons for caviar, but also algae. How about considering algae for helping to clean up the water, all this excess of nutrients, now that we are having this bioeconomy strategy, which is looking at increasing the biomass production. This could be another extra activity, economic activity that can bring benefits to the freshwater aquaculture. This is another FP7 project, but I brought it to your attention because they have developed completely oil fish and meat fish free for the feeding of the trout. They have all the results are available. They were considering also common carps, and I think it was a really step forward in the sustainability of the production of this particular species because as far as we have an independent way to feed the fish without harming the growth or the health of the fish, I think is really building the sustainability of the sector. And just the last one from the past, Diversified project, it was exploring on new species for aquaculture. You know that 6 species are produced in Europe commercially, which account for 90% of the production. So we really need to look into alternatives because consumers would like to have alternatives for this. This project, Diversify, has developed this pick perch species for freshwater aquaculture. They have produced these technical leaflets where they consider the whole production cycle, from fingerlings to feeding to animal diseases to different ways of production, even exploring the potential transformation and market opportunities. So again, this is available in the website and is free for you to see. And open up your mind to think out of the box about innovation on freshwater aquaculture. What's coming next? Horizon Europe. This is the next framework program, which is starting in 2021 and will last until 2027. So what is this program? It builds on the success of Horizon 2020. We have an impact assessment research study which says that it was a good program. It really provided results, so we don't reinvent the wheel, we just build on this. So it will be focused very much on providing scientific knowledge. We want to invest more in innovation, and we have to deliver on citizens. So the Commission this is the proposal of the Commission. You know, now we are negotiating with the European Parliament and the Council on the final EMF, which is the European Multi-Annual Finance. So we will see how much money accounts at the end. So this is again the proposal, how it's more or less divided. So we have as you say, 1/4 in excellent science. We have nearly half of the proposed money for global challenges. And we have this 13% for Innovative Europe. It's very good that the workshop is in innovative aquaculture because it has a whole field ahead of you to really find this necessary support for developing. What are the key features? We are supporting breakthrough innovations and create more impact on citizens. For that, they have created the European Innovation Council, and to create impact, the missions. There are other things that will continue, like the international cooperation. We will even extend the possibilities for international cooperation. We reinforce openness. We want that the project delivery is open and accessible for everyone. And we will make it easy to have access to the funding. And we encourage participation. So the structure is structured in 3 pillars. The first one is excellent in science, so it's to develop new knowledge. The European Research Council is the start of this pillar. It has been done very well in the past, and we will continue in the future. We have also the support for researchers through these Marie Curie actions. And of course, we want to invest in research infrastructures. I will move to the pillar 3, which is Innovative Europe. This is the novelty, the European Innovation Council. They want to do something similar to the European Research Council, but for innovators. So it will focus on entrepreneurs, bottom-up ideas, very innovative, disrupted, that is not easy for them to fill this gap between the idea and the pre-commercial product. And then we have the European innovation ecosystems. This is important because innovation doesn't happen like this. You really need to provide the ecosystem for the innovation to happen. That is the needs, the knowledge, and the entrepreneurial spirit, but also the finance. And then we also work with the European Institute of Innovation and Technology under this pillar P, which is Innovative Europe. Pillar 2 is the global challenges and the European industrial competitiveness. I would like you to take a look at the clusters. The last cluster, the cluster number 6, is on food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture and environment. Aquaculture will be mostly there. And in particular, the areas of intervention of this cluster 6, I just highlighted the food systems, the seas, ocean and inland waters, and the bio-based innovation. These are the areas where most probably you will find the necessary support for innovation in freshwater aquaculture. The Innovation Council, as I said, is for companies, mainly SMEs, but could be just an entrepreneur and startup also. The idea is that they make it through. It will be implemented through 2, let's say, instruments. The Pathfinders, which are grants, from early technology to pre-commercial. This is the collaborative research and innovation. And then we have the Accelerator, which is not only grants, but also some financial instruments, some adapted financial instrument, which will bring from the pre-commercial to the market and scale up. This is very, let's say, innovative because it's filling this valley of death of the companies. And the idea is that they will help innovators to create markets, leverage public-private finance until they grow up and they go on themselves. And the scale up these companies is innovation-centric, so we really are promoting innovation, is working on de-risking their activities to attract investors and to be proactive to make it through the market. What are the missions? You have heard about the missions. It's related to research and innovation, but it's citizens-focused. So, and it really wants to have a strong visibility and very tangible impact. So missions are, in a nutshell, they are a portfolio of actions that they have to achieve a very concrete and measurable goal in a time set with impact for society, policymakers, and the European population as such. They are already decided which 5 missions will be put forward for the next 3 years. Maybe later we'll have more, we will decide. And we have already nominated who will be the mission boards. So these are the 5 missions we have. For freshwater aquaculture, I see the healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters. There we have a lot to say in preserving and ensuring the health of our aquatic system productions. but maybe also in soils, health and food, because aquaculture mainly is for food, maybe can be also used for other things, but mainly for food. So what are the steps that we are now? So we, as I said, the members of the mission board has been nominated, the mission board has been established, they have started the work. We have already these R&I days in Brussels last September. It will be done again next year in September, so if you can do it, pass by, because it's very, let's say, close to the people to hear what the sector wants, what do we do, how can we better collaborate. And then we are starting with the first Horizon Europe, let's say, strategic programming. This has been published, consultation, because we want to know, out of this strategic planning, we will do the work programs, which will be start drafting in 2020. How does it work and where you can make a difference? We, the Commission, may propose based on the information we receive from stakeholders. As I said, the SCARFIS, the technology platforms, but also from Luque, they come to see us and tell us what are their views for freshwater aquaculture. So we digest all of this and we propose topics. We go to the program committee, which is composed of member states. So there in the program committee, we present what we think and they discuss. We agree, we don't, we think we should do that and this. So if you could make your voice heard by those representatives of your countries at the program committee, makes a lot of easier for us to support concretely actions. This will come. So it's as 2020 we will start. The official start of Horizon 20 will be 2021. As I said, we are now in a very good momentum for European aquaculture. Support will be there for innovation, but also basic research, because we need to de-risk this thing. So I really invite you to provide us support if you want to make unlock this potential activity. I mean, when you look at the production in Europe, it's a pity, only 1/3 or even less, when you have a lot of potential of providing food and jobs and is implementing all the political priorities of climate neutral activities, which absorbs, I mean, carbon sinks, climate resilient. So I think we should profit from this, because it may not come again in the next years. So from my side, this is all. Thank you. There you can find more information on Horizon Europe, and happy to help you.
Thank you, Marta. Time for questions, please. There are some topics which are important to mention. You mentioned about the accelerators, pathfinders, SMEs, so the industry, let's say, very industry-focused tools for generating progress. Mm-hmm. And at least I have been involved in, or let's say I have seen many projects during the last 15 years, and indeed the feeling is that there is a need that the industry is more strongly involved, and to also make the involvement more easy, so that they get the benefits easily and it's not too tough for the industries to join. So this is very positive. Can you a little bit reflect on, you have seen also many projects.
Yes, indeed. The problem is this is very competitive, but you have to start working from now, creating, let's say, first to create the sector, let's say, who are the entrepreneurs, who are the key innovators, who can you collaborate with, because it's not only aquaculture producers, you also need to connect with those providing technologies, those providing those digitalization of the sector. So you have to combine a lot. And then this is what we call the ecosystem. So there's going to be money available to create the, let's say, aquaculture ecosystem for innovation. Why not? In the last Aquaculture Europe 2019 in Berlin, there was a session on startups in aquaculture. The Innovation Council colleagues went there with the idea to offer some knowledge on how to create the aquaculture innovation. Because once it's there, it's a win-win. You get to know others, you combine expertise, and then you build up really the potential innovators, because it's not just to produce new, but the possibilities, the reality, the funding schemes, they will be putting in contact to those who has the money to make you grow. So as this starts now in 2021, And before that, you have the SME instrument. The SME instrument is very competitive. I know, very complicated, but exists. So it's a bottom-up scheme that gives personal finance for innovators. They have the first phase one, which is just 50,000 euros to assess an idea for innovation. If the idea works out, you go into the phase two, which is an innovation project. Still, can be just one beneficiary or a group. Depends on what you are planning to. And this is what they call the pilot of the Innovation Council. This will go to the Innovation Council and even more, because we want to focus. But my recommendation is, today you are contacting with the freshwater aquaculture community. Keep it. Let's try to build it even further. See interest aquaculture producers, linked to already organizations that are working on freshwater aquaculture. Luke is doing it. But also, for example, the European Aquaculture Technology, they can have a subgroup on aquaculture freshwater. And they start connecting this ecosystem of innovations. So it's a way to help you first to achieve the necessary support, financial support, and to make these innovations feasible, because they connect. It's connection systems, system of knowledge, systems on technologies, people who wants to take the risk and invest as a producer also. But as I said before, also logistic, markets. I mean, there's a holistic scope of possibilities, but it starts from here. Build a community and make it strong, and it will be easier to go through, because separate, isolate is very complicated. So I think it's very good thing what you've done today.
Yeah, one comment on this one. My, let's say, experience is that the freshwater aquaculture, it's more dispersed. The companies are smaller, they may be family based, whereas the marine industry, they are global majors, huge companies, and perhaps there's a little bit of different strategy how to construct, let's say, the industry-based projects. So, and perhaps the producer organizations, let's say for the aquaculture industry, for example, are key, because they are like an umbrella for many companies.
And they have the mirror platforms at the member state level. So through them, let's say at national level, you can connect. And then they have these operation national plans, which is linking also with the authorities. So, I mean, there's some structure there, but it's not connected. So we really have to make an effort to connect, to canalize all the needs and make it, let's say, easier to happen.
Do you want to comment, someone from Hungary or Czech Republic? All right, thank you, Marta. I forgot to mention about the Twitter. We are using the Twitter tag of EU Aquaculture, so in case you tweet. I would want to show one slide from my presentation. Okay, we are moving to the company and researcher presentations. I just want to show one specific slide about Finland to little bit. Okay. This one. Just to explain, let's say, the Nordic and Estonian Baltic area approach for freshwater aquaculture. So this is the map of Finland, and the dots that you see inland, we have 150,000 lakes. The dots that you see inland, they are inland farms, freshwater farms. So there are plenty of them. And they are both, let's say, broodstock farms. They are for human food production. They are also for restocking purposes. And some natural ponds. And one of the key things here is that the majority of our aquaculture production is at the coastal area. So it's a Baltic Sea, it's a closed sea, it's a brackish seawater. And now we really have never made a very strict distinction between freshwater and coastal aquaculture, because all our coastal aquaculture is 100% dependent on the freshwater side. All the fingerlings, all the eggs, all the brood stocks are in freshwater. So without the freshwater aquaculture, there would be no coastal aquaculture. They are combinedly logistically linked. And this is the same thing in Sweden, actually in a little bit in Norway also with the salmon, because salmon is a freshwater, they need freshwater brood stocks. But this is an important link for us, that for us the freshwater aquaculture is essentially important for the majority of the aquaculture which occurs by the coast. Okay. This was the introduction to the next speakers, because it's one of the, let's say, things which is setting the scene. The next speaker is Mari Heikkilä from Kalaneuvos Oy and Nordic Trout, two Finnish companies. Welcome. Joo.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Mari Heikkilä. I'm a marketing and communications manager. And for our family company Kalaneuvos in Finland. We have two companies, fish farming group Nordic Fish and Kalaneuvos, which is specialized in fish processing. And both companies have also some subsidiaries. The group has over 30 fish farming plants in mainland Finland, Åland and Sweden. As you can see on the graphic, we farm fish in mainland in freshwater and sea area, mainly by the coastal area and by Åland Island. Our fish farms can supply fresh trout to the wholesalers and further processors throughout the year. So the Kalaneuvos Group is specialized in fish farming, fish processing, wholesale, import and export. We employ some 270 people. Turnover last year was 120 million euros. Annual fish farming in total some 10,000 tons and annual fish processing 12,000 tons. So what's so special is that we have the whole trout chain under the control, from fish eggs to smolt production and adult fishes, and all the way until ready-to-eat products. And so we can control the quality all the way during the process, which takes up to 3 years. We have our fish egg and smolt production in freshwater, like mentioned before. And in terms of euros, trout is the most important domestic fish in Finland. And normally the size of harvested fish is around 2.5 kilos. And we also produce smolt for production and for the sales. And at the high season, we harvest up to 65 tons of fish per day. And we got fish for their own production and also for the exports. So we have a very long history. Actually, our story starts in this picture from the farm building at the back of the picture. And so over the 40 years, we have been growing quite strongly, especially during the last 10 years. And at the moment, we have a factory extension, which is not showing in this picture yet. And here you can see all the forests surrounding. Our energy for heating the factory and heating the water comes from the nearby forests. And last year we started factory extension. Actually, the opening ceremony will be at the end of this month, and it's a 28 million euros investment. we hire 30 new employees, and extension will provide about 14,000 tons of smoked fish annually. That's the capacity. And filleting capacity is about 12,000 tons annually. There will be a lot of production automation and significant growth in volume. And almost half of the investment is spent for equipment and machines. We will have, for example, 3 robots there. Baltic herring is very important in Finland, and our company in another location has heavily invested in Baltic herring fillet production technology by raising the quality of the Baltic herring fillets. We handle nearly 4,000 tons of Baltic herring annually. We would of course like people to eat more Baltic herring, but actually the demand has decreased since 1980s, or at the end of the 80s. And so most of the Baltic herring is used for feed. We produce also premium fish products under the Kalaneuvos brand, as well as private label brand names and for stores. We sell fish to wholesale customers in both domestic and international markets. And here you can see some examples of the very popular Finnish products. Hot smoked trout is very popular in Nordic countries, in Finland especially. We produce also cold smoked, lightly salted, marinated products, and we also produce trout raw, so like a red caviar. And then to the subject that we have already discussed a lot today. 70% of our planet is covered by water, yet only around 2% of the world's food supply comes from the ocean. So we see a lot of potential, and this graphic shows well the opportunities in aquaculture. With aquaculture, we can sustainably produce healthy and nutritious food. It's one of the fastest growing food producing sector and now accounts for 50% of the world's fish that is used for food. As we know, the supply of wild fish has a limited potential to meet the demand of growing population. And as the graphic shows, in many areas we have already reached the maximum level. In aquaculture, we have the potential and room to expand, to feed the growing population and provide more food security. Global production of aquaculture is higher than a beef production, and a few years ago the farmed fish has overtaken farmed beef in a production volume. So fish is one of the most sustainable way of producing animal protein. Here we can very clearly explain how with 1 kilogram of feed we can produce almost 1 kilogram of fish. With 100 kilograms of feed, we can produce over 60 kilos of eatable fish fillet. And here, when we compare to other products, we can see how significant the difference is. With 100 kilos of feed, we can produce some 4 kilos of eatable meat from the cows. And as fish is an adaptive cold-blooded animal, it's a great strength for efficient and sustainable food production. And we think that this is one way which helps us to find solutions against the climate change. And that's why we think that fish farming should not be seen as a problem, but as a solution. The carbon footprint for fish farming is one of the lowest in animal production, which emit 2.9 CO2 equivalents per kilo. In the fish farming, water consumption is the lowest compared to poultry, pig and beef production. The CO2 emissions and water consumptions associated to fish farming are mainly related to the production of fish feed. The trout and whitefish farmed in Finland are on the WWF's Seafoods Guide's Green List. That means a list of recommended fish by WWF as a best choice since 2014. This is a result of long-term development and innovations, especially in breeding. In Finland, total load has fallen by approximately 70% since early 1980s till 2016. And in 2016, new Baltic blend fish feed came on the market. By using Baltic blend, fish farms have removed phosphorus more than the fish farming's total load is yearly. And nitrogen has decreased by over 75% from the Baltic Sea. So in Finland, fish farming is close to 100% circular economy. Here we can see on this slide from Raisio Aqua, which is a fish feed producer, how nutritions are circulated. So actually the Baltic herring and sprat are used and made as a fish meal in a factory and then processed, and we get this fish feed. And that's very efficient way. And again, in this picture, just to show how fish farming has a very minor share of the nutrition load in the Baltic Sea generally. At the end, always in my presentations, I would also like to present this innovation. It's a packaging concept, EcoFish Box, which we are very proud of. We developed it jointly with Stora Enso, corrugated board producer, and we have used it since January 2017. Renewable materials will need to replace fossil-based materials to create a circular bioeconomy. EcoFish Box replaces EPS boxes to support sustainability. It's also space-saving in logistics, stores, and in recycling process. Generally, companies in Finland already utilize the whole fish, raw materials, and side streams in 100% efficiency, so there is a zero waste. And also, like earlier, we talk about the low-value fish products. We are already, for some years, been finding ways to use them. And we have quite few innovations how we can produce them and make very nice products. So at the end, we would like to present few points for the next steps in EU to support local fish products. The role of aquaculture in food security, in sustainable and economical production is very important. It has to be taken more seriously in EU policy. Fish farming supports the implementation of the EU circular economy package. But there is a conflict. EU supports fish products, but at the same time, fish farming is strongly restricted due to EU legislation. We have to focus more on fish as a food and give equal treatment compared to other food sectors. And we have to focus on fish farming, not only fisheries. We need a holistic view over the whole food industry and the role of fish farming in it. And in the EU Water Framework Directive, it feels like the big picture disappears. For example, we have the Weser decision, and things have then been made more difficult to get fish farming permits, so licenses, and on that way we actually waste time. And so we need more attention for local fish products, also in public procurement at EU and national levels. It's important to take in account that we employ people in peripheries. Aquaculture and fish industry deserves more attention in EU rural development policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari. Time for reflection, questions. Please.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mari, a lot for your very sort of inspiring presentation. And so it's very nice to hear that you really believe what you are doing, because you are expanding. And so how does it see from your perspective? What's the sort of main obstacle at the moment for the growth?
We really believe into this industry, and we would like to do so much more. But of course, the main problem is the raw material. We need more fish. And in Finland, we have all the potential. We have a cold climate, we have very few fish diseases, we have a lot of space, water, coastal area, but it's all up to licenses and permits. So that's the problem number one, or challenge.
Yes, please first in the front.
I'm first.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mari. It was very good presentation, and your conclusions are really nice and solid. What I have experienced, I'm coming from fisheries, and I'm a newcomer in aquaculture, but what I feel that people in general have not realized how much aquaculture has developed its standards and best practices, and how much less polluting it is making, and how much more sustainable industry it is. I can tell that even my wife have no clue, and she even still thinks that it's polluting the whole Baltic Sea, and it's completely wrong. So I have tried to say, well, things have changed, but it's really hard for people to understand, and because people don't have time to actually dig into the problem issues. So this old from 70s, 80s, this concept, it's still on the heads of most people. And that's why we have to speak more and show the numbers, the facts, that it's much more sustainable. And I think that's the key for the progress.
Yes, from the back, please.
From Seas at Risk. I would like to ask two questions. One, what your company's efforts are in reducing the amount of fish meal and fish oil you use. Are you involved in projects or initiatives to use more plant-based proteins? And a second question, you referred to the very low percentage of aquaculture's contribution to the nitrogen loading in the Baltic Sea. If the production of aquaculture would increase, would that percentage not also increase?
So in Finland, we have this special situation that we have so much Baltic herring and sprat. Only 3% is used as a consumer food. And so the most is used as a feed for other animals or for fishes. Like now we have, since 2016, this fish meal factory. So we buy the fish feed, and they are really doing a good job there by developing this. So I guess that was an answer for your first question. And your second question?
The second question was, you referred to the low nitrogen levels that aquaculture contributes in the Baltic Sea compared to other sectors. But would that nitrogen or that contribution not increase if what you're proposing, the sector grows as well?
Well, I think this is the key for the whole climate change discussion. So if we think that people are being encouraged to eat more or less meat, eat less meat and eat more vegetables, but so often these discussions forget the fish. And actually, if we would eat more fish generally, then in some point, we have to look the big picture. So the volume of nitrogen or phosphorus which is coming out of fish farming, and as I mentioned, it's been circulated, it is smaller to compare to other industries.
Yes, please, here.
Jouni Vilma from Luke. Maybe I can comment on the first question as well. We have been collaborating with this feed company, and they are aligning completely with the other feed industry, aqua feed industry. They use less and less fish meal and fish oil, but instead of using the ocean-based fish meal and fish oil, they are now using the fish oil and fish meal from the nearby regions. So instead of importing nutrients into the Baltic Sea, they circulate the nutrients within the Baltic Sea. But they are using more and more vegetable sources and other sources than fish meal and fish oil.
Thank you for the clarification. More questions? No. Thank you, Mari. The next one is Bela Halasikovacs, who is the director of Research Institute of Fisheries and Aquaculture. And
sorry for that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Bela Halasikovacs from Hungary. I'm the director of Research Institute for Fisheries and Aquaculture. We are working mainly for development of freshwater aquaculture, because Hungary is a landlocked country, so we haven't got any seas and oceans. The number of employees in the HOKI is the Research Institute for Fisheries and Aquaculture in Hungary. The employees number is 70. And we have different part of research activity. The first is technological development and fish biological, genetical, and immunological research, and hydrobiological research also. So, my presentation. How can I just here?
the research and innovations in Hungarian aquaculture, but I will talk about not only the Hungarian freshwater aquaculture, but I will also talk about the Central and Eastern European freshwater aquaculture, because it has some similarities among these countries. For example, Czech Republic, Romania, Croatia, and Hungary. In the first part, my presentation, I would like to introduce the role of the freshwater aquaculture in global production and in European production. You can see that in global aquaculture production, the freshwater aquaculture has a significant role with 60% of the total production, while in Europe, not in the EU, but in Europe, the marine aquaculture is more significant with 85%, and the freshwater aquaculture is only 12% in Europe. It means, in my thought, that we have, because this production connected not the European production, but rather the Asian, more or less the Chinese, Indonesian, and Vietnamese production. But I think it shows that there is a great potential, not only in marine aquaculture, not only the oceans, but also the freshwater has also potential for increasing our production. If you are talking about the trends and forecasted values of production of different freshwater fish species, you can see that the carps, it means the common carp, and beside the silver carp and other Chinese carp also, has a very great potential with a huge amount of production, not only recently but in the future also. So I think it is also highlighted that I told that we have a great potential in our freshwaters for aquaculture. The next, if we are talking about the European freshwater aquaculture, we have to, or the innovation of the freshwater aquaculture, we have to check how can we participate the EU projects, the EU programs for the innovation or freshwater aquaculture. You can see in that picture that the Western and Southern European countries participated 84% of the total budget for in Horizon 2020 programs between 2014 and 2019. It means more than €1 billion for these countries, and for the Central and Eastern European countries it means only €74 million. I think it means a huge disproportion between the Central and Eastern European countries and Western European countries. Naturally, it doesn't mean only a kind of disproportion of the new member states and the old member states of the EU, but also, and you can see on the map, you can see that it means also the disproportion between the freshwater aquaculture budget and the marine aquaculture and marine fisheries budget also. 2 weeks ago, or a few weeks ago, was held a presentation about the synergies between the Horizon Europe, the next program for research and innovation activities in fisheries and aquaculture, and the EMFF,
it was a very nice presentation, and it was nice to hear that these visions for increase or enhance the aquaculture programs and aquaculture innovation. But I would like to highlight two things. There is the areas for possible partnerships, but there are several possibilities. But there is only one for freshwater aquaculture. And if we are talking about the EMFF objectives, the 4 priorities, we can see there is only one priorities for aquaculture, and it doesn't mean freshwater aquaculture, it means aquaculture. So I think it's nice to hear this picture that the freshwater aquaculture also appear in the vision of EMFF and the vision of Horizon Europe. But I'm afraid that this situation, if this situation remain, it will preserve the leg of the freshwater aquaculture development. While in the first picture I presented that there is a huge potential in freshwater aquaculture. Okay, next part of my presentation about the Hungarian aquaculture, the recent aquaculture and the future aquaculture, what we would like to see in Hungary as a research institute. Today we have a significant part in our aquaculture is pond aquaculture. It's 81% the total aquaculture production in Hungary. But we have an increasing intensive aquaculture systems also, with about 19%. But there is a question: what should we want to do with this situation in Hungary? The first, produce wildlife. This is the traditional pond aquaculture. I think it is very important, but I don't want to talk about too much because it could be another presentation. I would like to talk about the mass production mainly for market. There are some innovative direction in our freshwater aquaculture, and the first bigger direction is the sustainable intensification of pond aquaculture, and it means that there are some possibilities to make a more competitive aquaculture in our fish ponds. There are some nice topic and nice projects. The first is the Kleinfish project, what was mentioned in the previous presentation, where we developed some kind of software-based decision support software for pond aquaculture. But there are also, it's a new initiative in Hungary. We research in this topic. This is a so-called smart nutrition cycle management. What is also a software-based decision support based on the nutrition, the continuous nutrition level measurement, and it can optimizes the inputs and can reduces the costs, what are very important in our aquaculture. The next, in this topic, the sustainable intensification of pond aquaculture, the intensive carp production in small size ponds. The small size ponds mean between half to 2 hectares, and it can be utilized for monoculture carp production. It's about 6,000 per hectare, or maybe up to 10,000 kilogram per hectare. But we can also integration of intensive in-pond unit in these small intensive ponds with other species, for example, pike perch, and all these system can reduce the necessary land use. And this system can reduce the water utilization, and this system is I think it's appropriate for new small farmers who want to produce intensive fish production and innovative fish production. We have good results with these kind of programs. The next is the combined intensive extensive systems, what like the other also connected the larger fish ponds, the traditional fish pond production, and it means a super intensive in-pond production. It's about 10 kilos per cubic meter. The previous meant about 1 kilogram per cubic meter. Anyway, the traditional pond farming means 0.1 kilogram per cubic meter. The previous was about 1 kilo, and this means 10 kilo per cubic meter. And it's very important that the nutrient cycling and the effluent from the intensive or super intensive in-pond system, the effluent goes to the not directly for natural waters, but the bigger fish pond, where this nutrient means a kind of nutrients for aquaculture production, the traditional carp aquaculture production. So it means these production, the combined intensive extensive systems, means a good example of circulate economy. Yes. In this system, we can significantly reduce the necessary workforce, what is one of the most important issue for freshwater aquaculture today, and also led to produce different fish species, for example, pike perch or European catfish, or maybe sturgeon. We have good experiences with these species all together with carps. And the other direction is the new species in intensive systems. This is not a new, but I wanted to show you because this is a real success story in Hungary, because today Hungary is market leader in African catfish production in EU with 3,000 or 3,050 tons production. The production is also flow through or RES system. It's a very good production because the production is about 400 kilograms per cubic meter, and we have soluted all the value chain from production to market, and we have good fillet yield and good post-harvest chain. The next is the pike perch, what is a very Janus-phased fish species because the fingerling, the larvae and the fingerling is very sensitive and very hard to produce. But we developed the off-seasonal reproduction technology. We developed the technology of intensive nursery and also the feeding technology of larvae, applying different additives of fish feed. And also developed the outgrowing technology, mainly not in intensive recirculation aquaculture system, but rather combined intensive extensive system, because it is more cheap than the whole RES system. So the recommended production technology for pipe perches, the larvae and the fingerling production in RES system, and after that in outdoor systems, for example, combined intensive extensive system, what is resulted a cheaper fish. The other fish species, new fish species in intensive systems, European catfish, we have a lot of different programs with this fish species. I think itself the technology is more simple than the pipe perch. We can reach about 200 kilograms per cubic meter. So I think it's a very good for intensive aquaculture system, and we can reach 3 kilograms per year. The self or the individual weight. And we focused on rather the selective breeding program. We have good results in this topic, applying novel molecular techniques, and our goal is an intensive technology tolerant and fast growing disease resistance strains. And finally, I would like to show you an evaluation of the freshwater aquaculture research topics. In the scarfish, we had some discussions about these topics, and in the previous presentation was another slide about it. But after that result, in the scarfish we stepped forward, and after that discussion we held a good workshop in Tartu, Estonia in this year spring, and we made a questionnaire, and in that workshop and with the questionnaire we put together all the demands for freshwater aquaculture research, and finally we made a prioritization report what was presented for scarfish in the last meeting in September. So there are some high priority or highest priority research priority, and we determined, or the participants determined, medium high research priority also. This report will finalize for the next scarfish meeting in the beginning of December, and we are intending to a printing version of this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bela, for a very clear presentation. Reflections, comments, questions? Yes, please.
Thank you. It was very interesting presentation, and what strikes me is really the use of this Horizon and EU funds to support the development in the Central, Western Europe and Eastern Europe. It's really striking difference, and I think we should do something in the future for that. And I think Luke, Natural Research Institute Finland, would be very motivated also to be part of having more intensity in the projects and development project in Eastern Europe, for instance in aquaculture development. So please keep in mind.
More comments? Can you comment little about, let's say, the novel products and processing industry? At least I have heard some fast food, carb food exists, like hot soups, which you can get from many different places. And
Yeah. One of our main issues, because our production systems are, I think, quite good. We know the new directions, and I think it is developing well in Hungary also. But the main issue for Hungarian aquaculture is the processing. One of the main issues, the processing. It means that the pond aquaculture, the product of pond aquaculture is not fully appropriate for processing, because you know, there are different fish species, different shape of species, and different weight of these species. So it is hard to process. And another thing, that the fish farmer came from the producer sector, from the guy who like fish, but nobody came from the processing sector. So everyone want to make or produce only the fish, but don't want to process. But we have some initiation for processing. For example, the African catfish, it is not possible to sell without processing. So the main product from this fish species is the fillet. But traditionally the carp production is sell in live in Hungary. Also we have some development in street food consumption, because you have to know that the Hungarian consumption is not so high. It's maybe the lowest, with Romania in the EU about 6.5 kilograms only. But I think anyway it is increasing, and I think the people need the aquaculture production, but beside the living carp, what is a very traditional production in Hungary, the consumer needs a more processed fish production. So this is what we have to develop in the future also.
yes, I can tell an example about processing in Finland. So my guess is that Kalaneuvos, for example, the way they function is that they have their own fish production. Then they also get salmon from abroad. And then you can balance a little bit that when do you have your own fish, when do you buy it from abroad. Then you can get fish from fisheries. And in fact, if there would be only fisheries, then perhaps there would be no processing industry for the wild fish. But aquaculture supports them both, like they go together. So there are multiple sources of raw material which is processed to make a balance for the company.
Yes, you are right. I think that the good solution is not the too much small processing plant, but rather bigger one, or maybe regional in Hungary. In Hungary, regional processing plants what can produce cheaper, because bigger, and integrate different producers. Only one comment for your sentence, that in Hungary the fisheries is banned from 2016, so we haven't got any commercial fisheries in Hungary. We utilize all the all the natural waters for angling.
Yes.
We have 5.
Okay, thank you, Bella. We move on.
Thank you.
The next one is Jouni Vielma from Luke from Finland.
Thank you, Antti. And thank you for the organizers, the Committee of the Regions, for the opportunity to be here. I will going to take you around about 10 minutes around RAS issues. What is RAS aquaculture? What are the good sides, the pros of the RAS aquaculture, and what are the challenges in the RAS sector? We have already heard quite a bit of talk about RAS today, so I will go a bit deeper, but not too deep in this issue. My personal background is in fish nutrition, fish feed development, sustainability issues of the feeds, and for the maybe 5-8 years I have been heavily involved in recirculation aquaculture research. I'm a research scientist and also a research manager at the Luke Natural Resources Institute of Finland. So like I said, I will quickly tell what actually RAS is, what are the good pros of the RAS, what are the challenges, and then finally what are the key issues to develop to get this RAS sector to grow sustainably. So practically the way we define RAS is the intensity of the water use. So the traditional inland farming, especially trout farming, it consumes about 10,000 to 50,000 liters of water per kilo of production, whereas RAS farms typically consume maybe 1 to 2% of that. So it's very heavily intensified in terms of water use. And there are also commercial examples of so-called zero exchange RAS, which use only down to about 30 liters of water per kilo feed. So the only water that leaves these kind of farms is actually very thick sludge that will be disposed or spread into the fields, for example, for agriculture. So the water intensity is the key issue of the RAS system. I will not go into the details of the different water treatment units that are involved in RAS. I have a graph here. It's available for everybody. So first step is to remove the solids. Then there are biological filtration systems called nitrification. There's a nitrification process there. Then there will be aeration and pH adjustments. Oxygen will be added at supersaturated levels, and then there will be usually some kind of disinfection as well. So there are several steps, a lot of technologies, and that of course will also increase the costs of this system. So what are the consequences of low water use? Because there's less water used, less water taken into the farm, there's less water going out of the farm, and that makes it possible to reduce the nutrient discharges quite heavily. It's not zero discharge. There's always some kind of a discharge from food consumption, like any food consumption. There's some sort of discharges always, but the nutrient discharges from RAS are quite low. And if there is a discharge licensing system, which means that the companies are not restricted in terms of the biomass growth they produce, but they are restricted on the amount of nutrient discharges. The lower you have the discharges, the more you can produce. So there is an incentive here. So that's one consequence. The second one is that these RAS farms can be located at very unconventional sites. This photograph was taken last winter in the middle of a pulp mill area in Finland, in the city of Varkaus. There are two RAS farms operating there. One sturgeon farm producing caviar, and then a newly established recirculation farm, Fin Forel, which is producing portion-size rainbow trout at about 1,300,000 tons per year. And also these farms can be located very near the markets. I have a slide over that on the global scale, but these farms can be located on the outer skirts of the big cities. And then the third plus of these systems is that the whole production cycle can be controlled much more easily, or at least it gives a possibility to control it. For example, you can produce any kind of species in any place in the world, practically. You can produce tropical fish in the northern hemisphere, or you can produce salmons in South Africa, for example, which is actually a case that will be taking place within a year or two. Then I will have two slides produced by banking company Rabobank. They show some figures and graphs about the salmon industry and the salmon RAS in salmon industry. Salmon, of course, it's a marine production, but I would like to show this as an example because the salmon sector is driving the whole development of RAS sector at the moment. So they are developing the technologies, and I believe they will be then spread all over the aquaculture sector. So, like Antti also already mentioned, that only the juvenile phase is produced in freshwater. The RAS, the salmon farming is the leading technology development. Like we already know, most of the salmon comes from Norway, and the trade is practically, of course, global. This one shows what is actually could be called a RAS hype. So there are a lot of RAS projects within the salmon sector. These figures give a prognosis of the RAS production in different countries. The numbers are quite huge, but the Rabobank analyzes that maybe 10-20% of these projects will actually take place. So there's some kind of a hype, and if you read the news in the aquaculture sector about RAS, you have to look carefully and follow the project, whether they will take place or not. For example, I mentioned the South African production project. There will be a RAS farm in Lesotho, and the construction phase will start next year, producing something like 25 million kilos. So these projects are huge. Most of these projects are still on the coastal areas, but not all of them. So some of them are independent of the seawater actually. So I have a slide on that bit later, but actually RAS is kind of disrupting the whole concept of what is marine aquaculture and what is freshwater aquaculture. It's RAS aquaculture, land-based aquaculture. But the development of RAS, it has not been all roses so far. It's quite opposite actually. There has been several cases of poor profitability and bankruptcies, for example, in the tilapia farming in Europe, and also tilapia and yellow perch farming in USA. The sector started quite heavily investing in RAS, but many of them, or majority actually of them, have gone bankrupt. And there are reasons for that. Like I said like I showed in the first graph, it's technologically quite complex. So every now and then there are technical failures, even though there are backup systems and backup systems for the backup systems. So there is still a possibility of a technological failure or a human failure. Very often the production target is not met. For example, the graph I showed you earlier, it shows the prognosis or the project size these companies are targeting at. But very often the production target is not met. Maybe 80% of the production target is only met, and that can cause serious problems for the economical profitability of the farming. And then the investments are heavy, so it needs a lot of capital to start with. So this is the challenge number one actually for the RAS sector. And our main message actually with this presentation is that the RAS will complement the traditional farming. It's not ready to replace it, and it may not ever replace it, because like we saw in one of the presentations, that there is huge potential still in the marine areas. There's huge potential in the traditional freshwater farming. So RAS will not replace this type of production. It will complement it. This graph, photograph shows company Savon Taimen in the central Finland. The RAS farm it takes a tiny amount of the whole area of the farm, producing about 150 tons of pike perch and then European whitefish, Coracon species, And the rest of the farm is traditional flow-through farm, mainly producing rainbow trout for the human consumption, but also some brown trout for restocking purposes. So RAS will complement but not replace the traditional farming. This is what I mentioned, referred to previously actually. This is an Atlantic salmon farm near Warsaw. It has boreholes where it takes the fresh water from, and after the fish multiplicate, they will be transferred to so-called seawater. So they use fresh water, but they add salt. So is this freshwater aquaculture? It's definitely not marine farming. It's not marine aquaculture. So this RAS actually disrupts this concept of different farming types to a certain extent at least. So it's land-based farming, it's RAS farming. It's not either or marine or freshwater, it's RAS. So the key issues towards successful RAS, the skillful personnel and in the planning and both in the management is maybe the key issues. This comes up every time we read news about new RAS project globally. So there are not enough people with enough knowledge and skills for planning on the planning side there is a lot of good companies nowadays, but especially in the management teams and everyday practices. So there's a lot of need for education in RAS. And also there's a lot of need for space for innovations. So this is a very young sector still compared to, for example, intensive pig production or poultry production. This is a very young sector and there's a lot of room for innovations. And this is what we and Haki, for example, work for. Like I mentioned, the profitability has been quite poor in many cases, and the RAS sector needs patient capital. So the licensing process is a long one, designing, construction, and then it also takes more time additional time to build the biomass. So before you can sell something, it takes years and years. So you need to have patient capital, and in many cases a lot of it. And then it also needs wise regulation and policy. So from the policy side, of course, you have to build incentives, but you have to build the incentives so that the traditional farming is not suffering from these incentives, but incentives should be enable these different sectors to grow hand in hand. Because in many cases, like the company I saw before, that the traditional farming is still paying the growing pains of this RAS sector. And finally, I have a couple of slides, a couple of pictures actually from our research R&D systems from Luke. We have individual RAS systems where we can very carefully and very accurately monitor water parameters and these sort of things. I can log into the water quality with my mobile today from this desk and see what's the oxygen content and CO2 content and so forth. And we have also innovated a new, what we called a passive water treatment system that was presented in Berlin 1 month ago. So we very much welcome collaboration from the private sector and from the research R&D to work with these systems and to collaboratively work towards a successful RAS sector. So this is what I briefly wanted to show about RAS, and the take-home message was that they go in hand. They are not alternatives to each other. So thank you for your interest.
Thank you, Jouni. Very clear questions again. Presentation again. Time for questions.
That's a good question. Actually, I don't believe in that. I think they have a lot of course, need and consumption within China. So I think the companies that want to establish in China, they are of course targeting at the Chinese consumers and Chinese markets. I would think so. But the future will show. First of all, how many fish farms and how quickly these salmon farms and other RES farms will be established in China in big scale. But I would think that the fish will remain in China for consumption.
More comments? One comment from me, just a clarification. If I have understood correctly, there are many RAS farms which actually they don't like remove the nutrients, that they use it several times and then it's just flow through. So when that is not an issue, then you can also do it in that way.
Well, most of the RES farms, when they take out of the solids, they dispose the solids somewhere else than in the water system. So they can dispersed in fields, or they can be used in biogas plants. Maybe the issue is a bit different in Norway. In Norway, the nutrient discharges has not been an issue actually so far, but there is also a question that these nutrients are, in the future, they are a resource. So it doesn't actually make sense in the future to dispose these nutrients once you have captured them in the particle filtration system. So it will have some value as a fertilizer in some other place.
More comments? I think because Pela also showed these RAS systems, but I mean the ones that you show, let's say in US, or they are these huge for Atlantic salmon. But what Pela is showing is somehow the scale is very different, and most likely the cost structure is completely different. I mean, these farms costs, I don't know, hundreds of millions of euros, and then the cost structure initially is very, let's say, tough. Whereas when you build a more, let's say, straightforward system, then the cost structure is very different.
Yeah, actually, there was a news yesterday, Undercurrent News portal, I think it was, Israeli and technology company commented on the scale and the costs. The more valuable species you are able to grow, the lower or the smaller the farms can be. So if you go to the bulk species, like salmon can be considered a bulk species nowadays, then you need huge farms. Then you need to start the RAS farm from something like 3 million kilos or something per one farm. But if you have a more valuable species like a pike perch or some other caviar production, then you can have a profitability at the lower volume.
Thank you. More questions? Yes.
It's just a comment that we also have to keep in mind that RAS is a very new innovation, that it will evolve, and we look 20 more years, we will have a much more options, and we will see that it has a role to play, although it certainly will not be a bulk production. But I think it will become a special solution in many areas in the years to come.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you, Jori. Okay.
Sorry, I've only a short question. Do you have experience with pike perch in RAS system in Finland?
Yes, there have been 2 commercial farms. One of them has gone bankrupt, and one is still up and running. So they are producing something like 100 tons, not more than that.
Thank you, Joni. Very good. It's been a long day. You have still one presentation. Thank you for your patience already at this stage. I will give the last presentation. Okay, I have a background from genetics and animal breeding. So I'm a researcher, principal researcher at Luke in Finland. I'm also a coordinator of one of the Horizon 2020 innovation projects. It's called Aqua Impact. We implement animal breeding programs and especially genomic selection in the European companies, fish breeding companies, and we also develop sustainable feeds for the genetically improved fish. And we apply digital technology to improve these two things. So that's the background. I have also worked with beef, cattle, pigs, chicken, a little bit with their genetics. What is animal breeding? Animal breeding means that we have a population of animals and we are able to identify which of these animals are genetically the most preferred ones. And typically we have the pedigree, we use DNA information, we use computing power to identify the genetically best individuals. And this is the technology which is used for cattle for tens of thousands of years in form of one or the other, but also in fish. It's very developed field. In Europe, if we look at the 5 main farmed species and the market share from the companies or breeding programs which have the genetically improved fish, what is their market share out of all the farmed fish? So this percentage ranges from 40 to 100. So for example, in rainbow trout, about 70% of the eggs in Europe originate from the breeding programs. In salmon, it's close to 100. In turbot, it's close to 100. So it has a major impact on the industry. And the percentage is much higher than the global values. So Europe is doing, let's say, fairly well. This map shows the breeding programs for rainbow trout in Europe. So the brood stocks, the breeding programs, they are always in freshwater. And what is a typical observation is that if there's a country that has a breeding program, it means that they make their fish material better and better and more competitive. Then typically their own domestic market is dominated by their own companies. You can every month buy eggs of rainbow trout from US if you want. So there's a global competition for these egg and fingerling products. So typically you have breeding program, you increase your self-sufficiency for European juvenile production. And some of the companies are large enough to export eggs to anywhere in the world. An example from Finland, we have a breeding program for rainbow trout and the European whitefish, which is a Coregonus. And initially when it started, of course, the market share was 0 out of all the fish in the market, but then it went up for rainbow trout up to, let's say, 80%. For European whitefish, it's something 40%. And of course, they are the companies, the broodstock companies that sell the eggs and the fingerlings to the on-growing farmers. So it's a typical example where your domestic market benefits from this sort of activity. This is a topic which was already mentioned. These are graphs from Finnish rainbow trout farms, from commercial farms. It's official data that is gathered. In every year, there's about 150 or 300 farms which give information about their feed intake, the amount of feed what they give, and then the biomass growth, from which we can calculate the feed conversion ratio. So in the graph on the left, we see that the feed conversion ratio goes down about 2 times. It's halved from the 80s. And this is due to all the activities what the farmers have done. It's because of the better feeds and also because of the better genetics of the fish. And at the same time, the phosphorus and nitrogen loading, this is what Mari was also saying, per 1,000 kilogram of produced fish, this is the specific loading, it has gone down more than 70%. So all the innovation research activities which has been taken into a practice has caused this reduction. And of course this means that because the feed costs are about half of the all cost of the aquaculture operations, if we can use 2 times less feed, then the costs are reduced by 25% at least, the total costs. And of course the environment benefits from this action. We have data to combine this commercial data with the breeding program data to estimate that how much genetics is responsible for this change. And if we take the duration when the breeding programs have been active, during this time the total change has been 0.45 unit improvement. And using the methods that we have, we can estimate that of this change, the red bar is due to the genetics, and the blue bar is due to feeds and feeding practices and what the farmers have done and this sort of thing. So around 40% of this change is due to the breeding programs, the genetics, and the rest is feeds, feeding, and management. Okay. Then we move towards genomic selection. What is genomic selection? We can explain it in a way that we start with what is a gene test. Many of you know what is a gene test. There has been a gene test developed for salmon which identifies the broodstock fish which are resistant to IPN virus. There's 1 or 2 genes which define the resistance. So you take a sample from the fish, you analyze that which allele, which gene form the fish have. If it has 2 resistant alleles, the mortality against this disease is close to 0. If you don't have these resistant alleles, the mortality in the population is 60%. So it's a simple gene test. And when you apply it, this data comes from Perform Fish, which is one of the European Union projects. When it was applied in 2009, 2010, the mortalities of salmon, which used to be, this is data from Marine Harvest, there used to be 5 million dying fish. It went down in 5 years close to some 10,000 of fish because the resistant allele became a dominant there. So this is a huge impact from the genetics. And now what is genomic selection? It's the same, but you think it in a way that rather than being 1 gene, there are 2,000 genes or 10,000 of genes which determine the trait. And then you have, rather than having 1 gene test marker, you test all the chromosomes for 50,000 molecular markers, and you predict the genetics of the fish. And this is the modern technology for animal breeding currently. It has been applied 10 years ago for cattle, chicken, pigs, and 5 years ago for salmon. And now all the other species are coming after. So this graph is the current state of the breeding programs for the 6 main species in Europe. So for carp, there's the transition to that the fish are ID marked, there's a pedigree, there's a family knowledge about the traits, and it becomes an efficient breeding program. The Atlantic salmon is the only one with the genomic selection, and then they can go really for the disease resistance and fillet percentage and this sort of more advanced traits. And all the other species are somewhere in the middle. And if we consider the freshwater aquaculture situation, then now the let's say the main development efforts are done to move rainbow trout and carp to the next level. There was the African catfish mentioned also, which already has a breeding program, which is very good. Okay, what has been extremely useful in Europe is that the projects that have been funded, they make people to network work. and there's very active knowledge transfer between the countries, between the species, and there's a very active research-industry collaboration. And this is from Fish Boost European Union project, where French people, Finnish people, Czech people cooperated to develop carp aquaculture. And the nice thing is that in the field of genetics, it's very scientifically led. All the improvements we do to the industry, they are also scientific novelties. So we combine the science, PhDs, education, and industry innovations. This is the target. It's not always 100% perfect, but the aim can be this ambitious. Okay, then we move to the clean aquatic environment. We have already talked about the nutrient loading to the sea, and what is important is that the clean water, it's not just important for aquaculture, but of course for fisheries, people, wildlife, biodiversity. This is a photo from Finland, so you understand that we are interested about the lakes and the sea and go there with the boat and go fishing and swimming. This graph you have already seen. This graph shows the sources of phosphorus from Finland to the sea. So where does it come from? Agriculture about 60%, industry cities 22%, and forestry 6%, perhaps more. And now if we want to make the clean waters, then of course we should have innovations, mechanisms to reduce nutrient flooding from agriculture and forestry. And one way to make it a freshwater concept is that we combine all these under the concept of clean rivers. If we would have clean rivers, it would be especially beneficial for all. And the logic is that this is mapped from Finland. We have cities inland, we have agriculture, crop fields, farm animals, forestry, and all the nutrients go to the lakes, to the streams, and then to the river, and then to the sea. And of course we have fish in the lakes and fish in the sea. Now if the river is clean, then it means that all these actors are working actively to reduce the nutrient loading. So that's the clean river concept. And of course it's one water body, so it's restricted area. So this sort of concept could be applied to really start to make the waters more clean. And Luke has research on forestry practices, agricultural practices, plant breeding, crop breeding, animal breeding, circular bioeconomy around these issues. And just to show some success stories, one of the themes here in the presentation is to show, let's say, what has been achieved. And one of the things we are working on is forestry planning. And you can model forests, how you cut them, where you leave the forest, how is the water flowing, how is the nutrient flowing to the lakes. And there has been a big change in the way the forests are managed. Most of the Finnish forests are managed by human. They are for commercial purposes. And you can see from the graph that, or from the photo, that there are these buffer zones around the lakes, so they buffer the flow of the water from the cutting of the trees. And the other one is how to make ditches, so the soil and the water flow within the soil is managed by men. How to make those so that there's no direct connection to the freshwater environment. A very similar example from crop sciences. We can model how much soil a crop field needs nutrients, then optimize the amount of fertilization in a large scale, in a smaller scale, and this has reduced the use of nutrients from the 19s to about half, and at the same time the phosphorus output from the crops, so the yields from the crops is increasing, for example, because of breeding, so they capture more nutrients. It means that the nutrients which flow from the crop fields to the water is reduced significantly. How well it's done, it's possible to calculate how it works. the changes what currently have been happening are not very super large, but I mean this is something which has been initiated quite recently. Okay, and why we talk about crops, fields and forestry is that they all influence the freshwater environment and aquaculture. And everybody would benefit that this sort of actions are happening. Okay, the last slide, added value products. We already talked about this. So there is a trend to make, for example, fish fingers from roach. And the roach is really it's not a farm species, it's a wild species. I know that Mari and others, they, for example, they take salmon or rainbow trout and they combine the wild fish there to make these sort of fish patties. And these are the easy to eat food for kids, for millennials to the schools, so that to increase the demand of fish consumption. Okay, conclusions. Animal breeding is an effective way to improve fish welfare, resource efficiency, reduce the environmental impact. It's good to think about the nutrient loading in a little bit wider scale, to think about forestry, aquaculture, and the fisheries is a good way to remove nutrients from the lakes. And there's a trend for packaged fish and added value products. Thank you. I will be the chair and the person to answer at the same time. I hope you don't find it inappropriate. Time for questions. Reflections. Read.
Okay, thank you. And then thank you for a very interesting overview what has happened. It has been like 20 years ago that I followed the situation, but it's very nice to see that a lot of development, good development has taken place. So how do you see future? Are these the sort of first steps, or are the sort of loops even longer in the future? Or what is askel? Steps, not loops, sorry.
Well, at least in Finland, the discussion around food, it's very active discussion. It's about the environmental impacts of the food, the health issues about food, the animal welfare issues of the food. It's very hot topic and people are very interested. Somehow I see positive things there, especially for the fish, that when the communication is based on what is really happening and how things are, then probably the fish side will become stronger. So people realize the potential there. People also think that where is the food coming? So my guess is that the active discussion will be beneficial. And I mean, if we take a normal milk bottle that is in the shop, it already has a sign that says, well, first of all, it says that it's milk from free cow, because they are allowed to run around. But it also says that in 15 years it will be carbon neutral milk. So they are already promising that they can make the circular economy work in a way that they can make the milk in a carbon neutral way. And of course it means that how you manage the farm so that you can make it carbon neutral. And I think this is a major step forward, that these strong environmental sustainability statements are there and people change, not perhaps dramatically, but step by step. More questions? Do you, Bella, want to tell about your catfish breeding program?
Yes, we have a breeding program in Hungary, but not African catfish, but European catfish. We have started 3 years ago, and we have anyway good results. We have about 15 percentage increasing in the individual growing. So we have good results with the species. I wanted to ask you only one question because there is a new proposal for aquaculture development in the EU, and there was a proposal to reduce the nutrients, and was a topic that the Baltic Sea is a good example to determine the theoretic nutrient level, and it could be help this method for other regions. But what do you think about how can you manage this way in freshwaters? Because I think in river systems has a very different nutrient fluctuation like a sea. So I think it could be a very interesting question, and I'm wondering about your opinion about this topic.
Okay, yes, I have heard there are some efforts calculate for the Baltic Sea let's say the amounts of nutrients that can come from different sources. If it's like a lake, of course the system is much more simple, but perhaps, I would say there are methods to calculate similar things. The river is, yes, special because it's a flowing water and more complex, but in general, human activity causes changes in the environment. I think that's like, we can't avoid it. And then we somehow need to define that what are the levels that we tolerate. And of course, to find some tolerant levels through calculations, it sounds very useful approach so that we get some understanding of such issues. Okay, thank you. Okay, if we little bit, we have had a long day, so very short summary. Things what have been popping up. One thing is what this talk is about demand, so that you have a product which needs to be appealing for the consumers. We have talked about technology, new technologies. Technologies themselves are not something that we should use. They need to have a purpose. So they need to have impact on the demand or then the cost structures of the production or the environment. One thing is communication, and this is something, a message to all, whatever your personal views are or whatever stakeholder group you represent. There should be a dialogue between the industries, between the consumers, and it's not communication itself, but a dialogue, which means that it's an interaction. People express their ideas, their facts, the data. Even we scientists like to say, okay, here is the data, so this is the truth. But of course, you can talk about that are there some other data sets and stuff. It's a dialogue, and it should take us further as a whole thing. So keep up the dialogue, and I think this has been such an event, and in the projects that are funded, the dialogue and the communication is extremely important, and you can all be involved with the dialogue. Thank you. some practical words. There's something, a social event after this outside, so please dialogue.
Sä mainittanut positiopaperista ja kaikille?
Ai joo. Missä niitä on?
Niistä on ulkopuolella.
Okay. One more issue. There is a position paper, so kind of a summary of this event outside. So it's a printed leaflet like this. Take it home and show it to your friends and talk about it, and most likely it will be in a digital form also, so that you can distribute it.